After the first 4 Harry Potter films, the tone of the series got considerably darker, which meant that the series was growing up with its audience. It could show some darker subject material, sometimes so dark that you can't even see what's going on screen unless you're watching this in the dead of night with no lights on. But because of this darker tone, a lot of the lighthearted, magical moments that we remember this series so fondly for kinda slipped away. So much so that a lot of the licensed toys, games, and even theme parks hardly ever touch on some of the later entries. So does that mean that this series got progressively worse as it went on? No, it doesn't. Some of these later movies are still favorites depending on who you're talking to, but it's certainly different from the first 4 movies that came before it. Personally, I find myself rewatching films 6, 7, and 8 much less than the first 5, and yeah, I'm including Order of the Phoenix for a specific reason, because usually when I'm in the mood to watch Harry Potter, it's gonna be one of the more magical and lighthearted ones, and when I get to the later movies, I'll watch them, but only if I'm making my way through the entire series. This is the second part of this video series, so if you haven't checked out the first part, you should do that now by clicking the icon in the top right corner of the screen. So in this video, I'm gonna be doing the same thing I did in that video, talking about the highs and lows of the movies, stuff from the books that was left out, even a little bit about the games, and overall Harry Potter related media. I also wanted to split up the videos like this, not only because that's how the Lego games did it, but because these 4 movies all had the same director, David Yates. So while the first 4 movies had 3 different directors and felt a bit off at times in terms of tone and certainly color, I'm sure having the same director means that all these films will be much more cohesive, right? So let's fly on over to 12 Grimmauld Place, try to get Slughorn's memories, and go on the search for some Horcruxes as we talk about Harry Potter years 5 through 7. So the 5th movie of the series immediately introduces us to Moody Harry. Harry, all throughout the Order of the Phoenix, is possessed and depressed. Now, in the movie, there's definitely some occasions where Harry is a pretty hard-to-root-for protagonist. The way he yells at Ron and Hermione and just is overall super angry, but it's nowhere near as bad as it is in the book. In the book, the first 400 pages of this 800-page book, he is just insufferable. Yes, he's going through trauma. Yes, he's literally possessed by Voldemort, but he's constantly pushing people closest away from him, and even just reading his inner thoughts, he's just not relatable by any means, because every decision he should make, and every decision that we're used to Harry making, he just does the opposite. A big part of the story, and why I think it's so successful by the end, is because of how frustrating this truly is. Harry isn't very likable. He and his friends make decisions that they shouldn't make. Harry is treated as a liar throughout the entire story. The government is interfering in things that they shouldn't. Dumbledore isn't talking to Harry. This is overall a very purposefully frustrating story. And again, very quickly, we're introduced to the title of this movie, The Order of the Phoenix, which stands out as weird to me in a few different ways. Number one, it just kinda does feel strange to have never heard of this Order of the Phoenix before. I bring this up a lot, and none of my other Harry Potter fan friends really agree with me, but if the Order was this resistance against Voldemort, I feel like the Order would have gained a bit of popularity after the First War ended. Like, oh, Voldemort was defeated because of Lily and James Potter, who were members of this underground resistance called the Order of the Phoenix, but it's never mentioned previously. Now, I know that's a bit of a nitpick, but I'm bringing it up for a reason, because as much as she might claim it, I do not think that Harry Potter as a series was all the way planned out as Joanne claims. But secondly, because the title of the story doesn't really make any sense, so let me explain. In my last video, I talked about how Harry Potter was incredibly successful as a franchise because these are mystery stories disguised as adventure fantasy, and each and every title of the series is all about the mystery of the story at hand. The one that sticks out the most to me is The Goblet of Fire, because in all actuality, The Goblet of Fire plays a very small part in that story. But it's because the mystery of that story is all about who put Harry's name in the goblet. But the Order of the Phoenix isn't a mystery. It's told to us almost right away, and there's no underlying mystery other than the fact that it's never been mentioned before. But there is a mystery in this story, and if you can believe it, it's all about the Department of Mysteries. Throughout the entire story, Harry is having visions of this department, knowing that there's something hiding there that he needs to find before Voldemort does, eventually actually going there to figure out what this mystery is. So if we're following the pattern of all other Harry Potter stories, the proper title for this one would have actually been Harry Potter and the Department of Mysteries, but maybe that title was a bit too on the nose, so I don't know, call it something else, like Harry Potter and the Department of the Phoenix. There, best of both worlds. The main thing that stood out to me as I was rewatching this movie was just how topical it was. Harry has been kept in the dark about what's happening in the wizarding world all summer because Cornelius Fudge has been slamming his name, telling people that Voldemort is not back and that both Harry and Dumbledore are liars. And honestly, I do kind of see where Fudge is coming from. From his perspective, Harry is this kid who miraculously won the Triwizard Cup, came back with the dead body of another student and said, "Oh man, it was Voldemort who did it. Yeah, it was Voldemort." Yeah, sure, kid. So he tries to get Harry expelled from Hogwarts and revoke his wand. And if his theory is correct and Harry literally killed another student to win the tournament, then I can see where he's coming from. Yes, the whole character of Fudge is all about how much of a coward he truly is. He just wants things to be alright in the world, because if they're not, then some of the blame falls to him. And throughout the story, according to Fudge, everything that's going wrong has nothing to do with Voldemort. It all has to do with Sirius Black. The one thing that actually has gone wrong and that he can allocate all the blame towards. There's a lot about controlling the media and interfering with what's being taught at schools, spreading false information taken as fact, and there's a lot of stories coming out today that have this exact same story. Honestly, if Order of the Phoenix came out in 2025, it would be called super woke. But despite all of this, despite the story being as frustrating as it is, I truly feel like this is the last magical movie. This still feels like a world of whimsy and cool, unbelievable magical places, and after this, it doesn't really go back to that. Of course, the movies after this all have magic in them, but this is still a very comfy and cozy film despite its darker themes. There's still a lot of moments of levity and fun, and that's a very tough balance to strike, but I think Order of the Phoenix really nails it. It doesn't nail it completely because there are a number of issues, mainly with Ron. David Yates, I don't know what it is, but I think he hates the character of Ron. This movie completely and fully leans into Ron being the comedic relief. Yes, it started a bit in the fourth movie, but a lot of those moments, like him in his dress robes, were pulled right from the book. In this movie, though, a lot of the Ron-isms were completely made up for this story. He is almost constantly getting the short end of the stick in this movie, and maybe that's because Rupert Grint has such a comedic presence to him that they really capitalized on this, but this movie was the start of a trend for Ron that made him the far and away bottom tier member of the Golden Trio. On the flip side of things, though, we're introduced to two new villains in this movie that would continue to be villains throughout the course of the films. And that's, of course, Helena Bonham Carter as Bellatrix Lestrange and Imelda Staunton as Dolores Jane Umbridge. And while these are two villains, they are completely different. Bellatrix is fun to watch on screen. Helena Bonham Carter absolutely kills it in this role. This is one of those castings that's going to be really hard to top, but really whenever she's on screen, I'm having a good time. But that might speak more to my personal issues than anything else. Umbridge, on the other hand, is a villain that is supremely easy to hate. Her personality and the way she speaks is another incredibly purposeful, frustrating aspect of the story, and Imelda Staunton just plays it so well. There are very few roles that people will hate the person acting it, unjustly I might add, like Jack Gleason as Joffrey comes to mind. People absolutely hated him because he was Joffrey, and Imelda Staunton is the same, which just really speaks to how great this performance is. The movie and the story really picks up when Harry decides to step up and become their teacher, since Umbridge isn't helping them at all. Once again, this is basically all Hermione's doing, and Ron is just kind of around for this, but this entire storyline is such a great story for the protagonist to go on. Everything that he learned on his own or with the help of his friends to prepare for the Triwizard Tournament last year is now being used to teach everybody else. This leads to a lot of really great and inspiring sequences to help Harry build his own confidence back and find his place in this world. His entire speech about great wizards all started out as students, so if they can do it, why not us, is actually a really great scene. And through all of this, it shows the audience, once again, that Harry is a great wizard and a great protagonist. These moments and sequences are certainly the highlight of this movie, especially with Filch and the Slytherins getting involved. It makes for a lot of really funny scenes and just overall fun sequences. We get some other really great scenes of the Weasley twins doing what they do best, and watching the fall of Umbridge to the Centaurs is immensely satisfying. I do wish that this movie included the reveal that Umbridge was the one who sent the Dementors to attack Harry at Privet Drive. Without that reveal, the whole inciting incident of the plot just never really comes back into play, and Umbridge kind of stays just as this mean professor instead of being truly evil. Another big sell of this movie is that we get more Sirius Black. The Harry and Sirius dynamic is the only thing that gives him a level head at times in this movie, and we get some of the best quotes and moments of the series with the two of them interacting. We also get those infamous flashbacks that are stirring up a lot of issues nowadays with the Snape casting, and in the book, this kind of shakes Harry to his core, learning more about who his dad was and who Sirius might be now still, and makes us perceive Snape and Harry and all the Marauders a bit differently. However, in the movie, Harry sees this and sort of just moves on from it. That's something I am 100% sure this new TV series will not be doing. But this movie overall just elevates a lot of the side characters better than it did in previous entries. There's the one-on-one scenes with Alan Rickman, more of the Weasleys, more of the other students in Dumbledore's army, and when you take into consideration that this movie also introduced new characters like Tonks and Luna, balancing all the screen time of these characters becomes extremely impressive, especially since this is the longest book in the series, but the second shortest movie, coming in at 2 hours and 18 minutes. But that also meant that a good chunk of stuff was cut out for this movie, as is a trend for a lot of these later entries. The fight at the Department of Mysteries is both the best fight in the series, but also nowhere near as good as it should have been. This is where that more joyful tone of the film kind of ruins that scene, that or the budget, because in the book they find this giant time turner room, a room filled with jars of brains, and overall it just gives the impression that these kids are going up against fully grown dark wizards because they get their asses absolutely handed to them. That's not really present in this movie. This is still a sort of, yay, the kids are going to save the day at the end, even when they really don't and Sirius is killed, but the members of Dumbledore's army get very injured and are all just woefully unprepared to fight these wizards. Ginny breaks her leg, Hermione gets knocked unconscious, Ron gets hit with a hex that makes him seem super drunk, which is an incredibly funny spell, but all of these extra rooms and extra fights are cut short, meaning the Department of Mysteries in this movie is just the Prophecy Room and the Death Chamber. But without a doubt, this movie takes the cake for the best wizard duel throughout the entire series, and that's Fantastic Beasts included. Dumbledore versus Voldemort is very creative and just all around far more satisfying than seeing two people point their wands at each other for a few minutes. I think the wizarding world as a whole has such an incredible action deficiency because the opportunity for great wizard duels is out there, but I just doubt we'll ever see one top this one on screen. Maybe the TV show's version will be better if it ever gets there, but I still love this whole moment, mainly for this scene. But perhaps the most important thing to be cut out from this movie is Sirius's gift to Harry, which is a two-way mirror, allowing him to talk to Sirius without the threat of exposing his location. Harry never uses this, and if he had, then he would have never had to go to the Ministry at all, which makes Sirius's death all the more tragic. And that ends the book on a bit of a dark note, but the movie ends with this.
We've got one thing that Voldemort doesn't have. Yeah?
Just there.
I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the Order of the Phoenix. I know this one doesn't usually resonate or rank as high as some of the others, but this story almost sells you more on what the point of this series actually is than any other entry. Having people by your side and there for you when you're at your lowest. Doesn't have to be family, doesn't have to be people you've even known for too long or necessarily even want around, but when people are there to lift you up, you become a better version of yourself. And that's truly what the heart of this story is, the power of friendship. And this entry in the series shows that the best. So yeah, this is one of my favorite Harry Potter movies. I'm going 8.5. So whenever the movies are brought up, and subsequently this new remake, conversations about cut content from the books is inevitably brought up, mostly as a knock against the movies, and I've obviously talked about that extensively in these videos, but when I think about stuff being cut from the movies, the first story that I think about is the Half-Blood Prince. There is a pretty egregious amount of cut content from the story in this film, replaced with other scenes that just aren't needed or don't make that much sense, and this is a particular issue with this entry in the series because, truth be told, there's not a whole lot of story here. The Half-Blood Prince is all about setting up the Deathly Hallows, setting up Voldemort's Horcruxes, Voldemort's return, Snape's role, Dumbledore's death, and that's kind of it. There's not as much of a concrete or self-contained plotline like there is in all of the other previous entries, so when you cut out the actual storylines from the book, it has to be replaced with other stuff. A large part of the book is all about figuring out Voldemort's past. How he was a child of a love potion, the Gaunt family, Thomas Riddle Sr., a lot of this stuff, which I'm not really gonna get into extensively, but all of this was cut, save for a couple scenes of Tom Riddle at an orphanage and at Hogwarts. Now, was all of this stuff that was cut needed to tell the story of the Horcruxes? No, clearly not, but it certainly added a few dimensions to the character of Voldemort and why he is the way he is, making him both more sympathetic and terrifying because of his background. So because all this is cut, Voldemort is still just your pretty standard Dark Lord who's evil for the sake of being evil and wants to take over the world. Even the very beginning of the book opens up on one of the more interesting chapters in the entire series, which is from the perspective of the Muggle Prime Minister and Fudge coming to tell him that the Dark Lord of their world has returned. It's certainly going to be one of the more highly anticipated scenes in the new adaptation for sure. Not sure if it'll make for an entire episode, but definitely like an extended cold open would definitely work. As for the movie itself, this is a completely different looking Harry Potter film. It probably has the most unique color palette of all the films. Sometimes when it looks like this moody brown greenish outside, I'll literally say, wow, look, it looks like the Half-Blood Prince outside. This movie was nominated for Best Cinematography at the Oscars. And despite the Oscars themselves not really caring for this award, this is a pretty big award. The biggest award that any Harry Potter movie was ever up for. It didn't win, but still pretty cool. I almost think this film seems like an answer to The Prisoner of Azkaban, and how much that movie shook up the franchise. Films 1 and 2 have the same sort of vibe, films 3, 4, and 5 kind of have the same vibe, and I believe the intent was for Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows to have the same vibe, but the two movies after this definitely don't look or feel like the Half-Blood Prince, making this one stand out even more. This is also the first one to be rated PG since Prisoner of Azkaban, and subsequently the last one to be rated PG from here on out. While the themes are darker and there's some horrific scenes, the tone of this movie in particular is wildly all over the place. There's an emphasis on trying to be the last magical, fun school movie, but it's also being filmed as this like HBO drama show. There's callbacks to previous films, even some filming locations that they haven't been to since the second movie, really reminding you of these things since this is really the last happy-go-lucky Hogwarts adventure. With that being said, this story and how everything works and feels, it feels the most grounded out of the entire series. Even things like Quidditch don't seem very magical anymore, maybe because we're just used to it, but also because of the way the scenes are handled. This is much more of a slow burn film and story in general. The whole A-plot of this story is about Harry and Dumbledore slowly uncovering Voldemort's past. The B-plot is about Harry and the book written by the Half-Blood Prince, and the C-plot is all about that sweet, sweet teenage drama, which this movie leans very heavily into. Ron is now a hotshot jock on the Quidditch team, so he gets the girl, and Hermione doesn't like that. She even goes out with Ron's backup just to make him jealous, even though he shouldn't be the backup because Hermione sabotaged his tryout with magic, which, I guess good thing sports betting isn't a thing in the wizarding world, because I'm sure all of these wizards would be sabotaging other teams. Wait a minute, in the books, sports betting is a thing. Despite this, Ron is still the comedic relief of the movie. Even after almost dying, it's played up for a moment of teenage drama. Harry now very suddenly has a crush on Ginny, even though the two share absolutely zero chemistry together. There was a tiny amount of setup for this in the previous movie, but not enough. I don't think the two actually shared a conversation in the last movie. Ginny just kind of looks at him funny from time to time. Now listen, stuff like this is very difficult. You casted these two when they were like 10 years old, and now half a decade later, you expect them to just magically get all this chemistry together. Sometimes that just doesn't happen. Even with these new cast members for the new adaptation, are they really doing like chemistry reads between these two young kids for the future? If they are, that's kind of weird, and these two kids are going to change so much over the next few years that it might not even stick, even if they are doing some sort of chemistry test with them. But you know who Harry does have chemistry with in the movies? Luna. Now this might come down to Daniel Radcliffe and Ivana Lynch having better chemistry. In fact, I'm almost certain that's what it is, but these two complement each other super well, especially because Daniel's Harry is pretty different from book Harry. Daniel's Harry is also super awkward, even when this is the story he's supposed to become like the coolest kid in school now that everybody believes him about Voldemort and knows that he's the chosen one. Now this movie does have a few scenes that lean into that aspect, but overall he just seems to have much better chemistry on screen with Luna than he does with Ginny. And this might be the hottest take I've ever said in any of my videos, but I think they should have changed this for the movies, and Harry should have just ended up with Luna. In fact, if they make some change like this in the TV show, I'd be on board with it. It almost feels like that's the natural progression of these two in the films, but then Ginny just kind of comes out of nowhere. With that being said, perhaps if the films had made Ginny a bit more like her book counterpart, then I wouldn't have this opinion. Ginny is probably the character who ends up being the most different from her book counterpart. Ginny in the books, sure, she starts off as this shy and quiet girl, but she's 11. Then she grows up. She's confident, witty, charismatic, and an actual leader. The movies sort of attempted this. I mean, she was there in the Department of Mysteries. She tells everybody to shut up on the Quidditch pitch. But the scenes she's in are more so played for shock that she's able to do these things, not that she's grown up and has become a more confident person. So in The Half-Blood Prince, Harry pretty immediately has a crush on Ginny, and it feels like it comes out of nowhere. I'm not sure if the writers weren't sure that Bonnie Wright was able to achieve this more witty and charismatic performance, or they thought that what they did was fine, but it's definitely a sore spot in the films from this point forward. They even try to add in some more scenes for them to build up their dynamic and chemistry, like this whole attack on the burrow sequence. This whole scene is nowhere to be found in the book, and I can really only imagine they added this in here to try and build up the chemistry between these two characters, because there's nothing of consequence that comes from this scene. The burrow gets set on fire, but it's fine again in the next movie. Nobody dies, nobody gets injured, no one even changes from this scene. If you took this out and just moved on to the next scene, nothing would change. On the flip side of things though, one thing this movie actually finally gets right is Dumbledore. Michael Gambon perfectly nails the role of Dumbledore in this film. It does feel a bit off because none of his other performances are like this, but this truly feels like a continuation of Richard Harris's Dumbledore. He's a bit whimsical and seemingly absent-minded, but he's got a concrete and calculated plan that he's really manipulating Harry into doing because it's of the utmost importance. He's also given more proper material to show how good of an actor he is, like with the scenes in the Horcrux cave. He saved it until the very end, but both he and David Yates finally got the core essence of the character done correctly. Similarly, Jim Broadbent as Slughorn is also an incredible performance for a character who is wildly different from his book counterpart. Slughorn in the books is this arrogant and self-centered person who's solely focused on collecting popular and famous students as a way to elevate his own status. A pretty pure Slytherin move. In the movie, he still does this, but Jim Broadbent and his performance makes this aspect of the character come across as far more sympathetic. Slughorn is lonely. He's proud of his students and cherry picks different favorites, and yes, it's also to elevate his own status, but it's also in a way that doesn't feel arrogant or self-serving. It's like it's the only thing he has in his life going for him. His connection with more powerful and younger people. And the film makes this distinct difference on purpose. He's much more willing to help Harry and collect him rather than join the Death Eaters. It's not that he wants power, it's that he wants to surround himself with success because he's achieved very little remarkable success of his own. He's not an evil Slytherin. He proves, perhaps a little too late, that all Slytherins aren't evil, and their usual traits, ambition, determination, and resourcefulness, aren't always used for bad things. The central mystery of this movie is all about who the Half-Blood Prince is. This person who's perfected the art of potions and has left all sorts of different notes and corrections in Harry's advanced potion-making book. This story always had me picking up the old, crusty, and dusty textbooks whenever I got the chance, thinking that surely one of them would end up being like this. But that never happened, so I just had a bunch of textbooks filled with graffiti and half-ripped-out pages. But this isn't really much of a mystery. Who do we know who's really good at potions? Snape. But that's such an obvious answer. He's the damn potions master. It's literally his title for the entire book series up until now, so it obviously can't be him. Whoever it is, though, must be extremely important. They must reveal themselves and maybe even teach Harry some other things about potions or other spells like Sectum Sempra in order to give him the upper hand in defeating Voldemort. I mean, that would make this story make more sense, to give him some sort of knowledge that he uses to defeat Voldemort once and for all. So, who is the Half-Blood Prince? Oh, it is just Snape, and this reveal doesn't change anything. Now, I've always thought this, even in the context of the book, but the reveal of Snape being the Half-Blood Prince doesn't mean anything at all. There's this big dramatic reveal where Snape says this, but it's just like, alright, so what? Him being the Half-Blood Prince doesn't change anything about this story. Harry doesn't learn anything from this book that would be useful to defeat Voldemort. The Half-Blood Prince pseudonym doesn't help him in any way. Of course, Snape eventually does, but the whole plot in this story doesn't change if Snape is or isn't the Half-Blood Prince. Now, I know Tom Felton gets his fair share of criticism online for being the only one clinging on to the Harry Potter story, which isn't even true. The Phelps twins literally run a Harry Potter baking show, but this movie truly belongs to Draco Malfoy. There's a bit of mystery about what Draco is up to, but pretty soon it's revealed that Harry is telling the truth, and everything he theorizes is correct. Draco is now a Death Eater. He's the one trying to kill Dumbledore, and in the books, Harry comes across as that meme from Always Sunny because everything he's saying seems pretty far-fetched, but since the movies aren't solely from Harry's perspective, we get a better insight into Draco's character, what he's doing, why he's doing it, and how truly damaged he is from this job. Tom Felton actually gives one of the great child performances. I know at this point they weren't really children, but I'm constantly blown away by his performance in this movie every time I watch it. He far outshines any of the other cast members his own age in this film. Another really big difference from the book to the film is the entire climax and Dumbledore's death. First off, the whole Snape shushing Harry scene doesn't happen, which is really a huge indicator that Snape isn't really evil, so for all the movie-only people, this was a huge red flag as to what was actually going on. Harry also doesn't just stand there like an idiot. He quite literally can't move, because Dumbledore has jinxed him under the invisibility cloak, so he couldn't do anything, even if he wanted to. Then afterwards, there isn't some brisk walk to the exit, there's a giant battle with the Order of the Phoenix against the Death Eaters in Hogwarts, and if this whole aspect had been included, the movie certainly would have been rated PG-13, but maybe even rated R. In the book, Harry talks about how there's giant pools of blood and bodies on the floor as he makes his way through Hogwarts, scared students crying in the corner because they don't know what's going on and people are just dead, bloody marks on the wall from other dead, presumably students. Even Dumbledore's body isn't just gently laid on the ground like it is in the movie, it looks as though he fell the 80 or so stories from the astronomy tower. It's such a dark sequence, and the movie definitely didn't want to go there. Harry is the only one going after Snape because everybody else is so preoccupied with fighting off the Death Eaters, not just standing around Dumbledore's body pointing their wands in the sky. And to make matters even worse, the whole Horcrux trip to the Horcrux Cave, great name, was seemingly for nothing, because it wasn't even the real Horcrux. I like this movie, but I can't say it's one that I rewatch as much as the first 5. I have to be on a marathon of the movies to watch this one, and really any of the ones from here on out, but that doesn't make it a bad movie. But because of how much was cut out from the books and the tonal issues, I'm gonna give The Half-Blood Prince a 7.2 out of 10. So despite The Half-Blood Prince looking really different, Deathly Hallows Part 1 is easily the actually most different of all the Harry Potter films. This is a Wizarding World movie without Hogwarts, which hasn't really worked out too well in the past, well, I guess future, but since this movie has the Golden Trio in it, it still works. Mostly. In huge contrast to the last film, The Deathly Hallows might actually be the most accurate book-to-screen adaptation, which, yeah, it better be, since this was the movie that started the trend of splitting final entries into Part 1 and Part 2. But unlike a lot of those other cash grab Part 2s, Harry Potter actually had a reason to do this. When Steve Kloves wrote the initial script of The Deathly Hallows, trying to keep it as true to the source material as he could, the script came in at well over 400 pages. So to try and go all out for this final entry in this decade-long franchise, they split it up into 2 movies. Was there a monetary objective from Warner Brothers? Yes, of course there was. I'm not saying that, but the Harry Potter books were big enough to actually be split, unlike a lot of the others that followed in this trend. But because it is split up, this means that Part 1 obviously has a much slower pace. Some will definitely refer to this as the most boring movie because of its pace and its lack of action, and I definitely thought that too when I was 11, but not anymore. However, a lot of the actual action and plot does happen off-screen, both in this and in the book. Mad-Eye Moody is killed off-screen, the Ministry of Magic falls to Voldemort off-screen, everything happening at Hogwarts happens off-screen. I just feel like there was room for a lot of this stuff to happen on-screen in the movie, and 10 years from now, if we're still getting that TV show, I do hope that there's some additional points of view of all this stuff happening. I'd love to see Neville or Ginny's time at Hogwarts to really emphasize how different things are and how they're still keeping everybody's hopes up. We hear a little about what they're doing in Part 2, but seeing that would be pretty cool. So the movie starts off with everybody getting ready for their journey, Hermione erasing her parents' memories of her, a severely underrated act of bravery that isn't mentioned again or even resolved in the movies, and Harry banishing the Dursleys from their home. There's a cut scene of Dudley saying goodbye to Harry that I really wish they hadn't cut out, but afterwards we see that Harry has this strange shard of glass. That doesn't make any sense at all. Oh, this is a piece of that two-way mirror from the books. This is far and away the most egregious example of the movies adding things in later and just pretending they were there the whole time. There is no mention of this mirror at all, or even a scene that adds it in the Half-Blood Prince, which they easily could have done since, from this point onward, all of the books were out. They knew this mirror was important all the way back in 2007 when Order of the Phoenix came out, but they decided against including it, leaving it up to book fans to lean over and whisper what's going on to their non-book reader friends. We get a point of view of Voldemort and all of his followers at Malfoy Manor, and this is a great scene, but I also just want to take the time now to point out that Jason Isaacs as Lucius Malfoy is much better in the movie than he is in the book. I didn't mention him at all during the second or fourth movies, and I should have, so I'm going to give him his flowers here. He is playing a completely different Lucius in this movie and the next movie than he was back then, and that's a Jason Isaacs thing. I don't think that, it's been a little while since I read the books, but I don't think that Lucius is as, shriveled up and scared of Voldemort as he is in these scenes, and Jason Isaacs overall is just such a phenomenal actor. He added so much to the character of Lucius Malfoy, so giving him his flowers here. Then we go to see what Harry and everybody are up to, and they're all turning into Harry, which is just a pretty dumb plan. Why not just turn Harry into somebody else? But this is a funny sequence, and it does seem more in line with all of the really weird projects Daniel Radcliffe has done since. So this whole movie is all about this journey to find and destroy the Horcruxes, the task that Dumbledore basically left Harry to deal with on his own, and you can really feel just how big of a job this actually is. They have absolutely no leads, no idea where to go, and pair this with the fact that Harry starts to question Dumbledore's motives and who he really was, the odds just seem to be incredibly stacked against them. But the movie doesn't go into this nearly as much as it did in the book. The whole conflict of this movie and the first half of the book is if they should actually trust Dumbledore, because the more they find out about him, the less trusting he seems. And with their main piece of evidence going forward being this fairy tale book, the odds of all this being true and amounting to something seems impossible. The Deathly Hallows, while we know it's a children's story, is treated like fact in this movie, whereas in the book, it very much feels like fiction, and this journey that they're on feels even more daunting. And when they're on their journey, they feel incredibly alone. They can't tell anybody about their plan, they're on the run, though they do meet some old friends like Dobby, who's super happy to see Harry and Ron again. Wait a minute, Dobby and Ron never actually met in the movies, so this doesn't make a lot of sense. Yet again, some oversight on the films. Without a doubt, the biggest sequence of this movie is when they all infiltrate the Ministry. Even just seeing how different this place is now from the last time we saw it shows just how much has changed in this world. The stakes feel very high, and with the different actors playing the trio, it feels very different from anything we've seen before. The actors for Ron and Hermione play their roles very well, even if Ron is at an all-time high in stupidity.
What am I gonna do? My wife's all alone downstairs.
Ron, you don't have a wife.
But this guy playing Harry, I don't know what movies he was watching before this, but this is just not how Harry acts whatsoever. I know Harry is this awkward teenager, but why is this dude walking like this? Is this just how Daniel Radcliffe walks in real life, so this guy copied it? I have no idea what this guy was thinking, but it makes me laugh every time I watch it. But they eventually successfully subdue Umbridge and get the locket, which moves us onto the camping portion of the movie. Even in the book, the whole camping section feels like it goes on forever, and yeah, even watching it today, it does feel a bit boring, but it also feels pretty realistic. The locket is very clearly just the One Ring from Lord of the Rings, so it makes everybody angry who's wearing it. This makes Harry and Ron come to blows with one another, especially with Hermione there and the different romantic feelings involved. It feels like this very well could happen. These three 17-year-olds are trying to save the world, the tensions are high, there's romance, it all feels pretty realistic. However, this whole portion of the movie probably delivers some of the greatest cinematography of the entire series. No, this one wasn't nominated for that award, but I'm certain that the crew and the cinematographer had a really great time with this movie because of how different it was from all the others. The whole second act leaves a lot to be desired, but it does have the very infamous Harry and Hermione dancing scene. This is not something that was in the book, so it is obviously very controversial. It seems like you either love this edition or you hate it. I'm more on the side of the former though. For a few years I didn't watch this movie, so when I did watch it again and this scene happened, I genuinely thought I must have forgotten that these two kissed, because this entire scene is very clearly heading in that direction, purposefully so. But at the end, that doesn't happen, and I think this scene very much captures the essence of Harry and Hermione's friendship. Hermione does so much for Harry in this movie and in every movie. She's always there for him no matter the situation, and this is really one of the only times we get to see Harry being there for Hermione. He's not making a move on her or anything like that, but he's trying to take her mind off of the horrible situation that they're in, and he does that successfully, even for just a few minutes. And we don't get to see a whole lot of Harry being there for Hermione in the movies like we do in the books, so I really like this change. I know it makes the Harry and Hermione shippers very happy. I've already told you all I'm not one of those people. I'm a Larry shipper, so there you go. Then we have the whole Godric's Hollow portion of the film, which is the most horror movie coded scene out of the entire series. Ron coming back and finally destroying a Horcrux. I remember watching this movie with my dad one time, and he said, yeah, that was a good movie, but they didn't really accomplish anything. They have 7 of these things to destroy, and it took them this entire movie just to find and destroy one of them. And honestly, yeah, he's got a point. That makes 3 of the 7 Horcruxes destroyed. If we're staying on that trajectory, it's going to be Deathly Hallows Part 5 before we finally get to the end of all this. The third act of this movie, again, leaves a lot to be desired and feels a bit underwhelming. Having the climax of the film be this little squabble at Malfoy Manor is not all that exciting, but the whole sequence of them running away from the Snatchers is great. I remember watching a ton of the behind the scenes on this moment and how long it took for them to film just for it to be like a 2-minute scene in the movie. Really goes to show just how much effort was not only in this film, but all films take to make. Dobby's death is always heart-wrenching to watch, and the film ends on a proper cliffhanger of Voldemort getting the Elder Wand. Again, I like this movie. It's never the one that I turn to watch when I want to watch a Harry Potter movie, simply because it's not what I think of when I think of wanting to watch a Harry Potter movie. But that doesn't make it a bad movie. So I'm going 7.7 out of 10. So the final movie of the franchise, the one that was supremely hyped up to no end, the movie that I saw at midnight and every single theater was filled to capacity, all of them showing this movie. This final entry really does not disappoint. This movie is just flat out cool. It's satisfying, cinematic, and a worthy end to such a big franchise. And that's not something we see a whole lot of nowadays with endless sequels or just rushed endings. Deathly Hallows Part 2 really stands out in a sea of less than great fantasy endings. This movie also comes in at a runtime of 2 hours and 10 minutes, making this the shortest Harry Potter movie. So it's all action, no fluff, and because there was a whole movie, well, really 2 whole movies of setup, this one gets started right away. And with 4 more Horcruxes needing to be destroyed, it kinda needed to. The first sequence of this movie is the infiltration of Gringotts, which makes for a great start of the movie, sure, but I almost feel like it would have been a better ending to part 1. This kind of feels like a proper climax, but this is all just nitpicking. It would have messed up the pacing, so I get it. Helena Bonham Carter pretending to be Emma Watson as Hermione is so great. It's such a tense sequence. They lose their only way to actually destroy Horcruxes, so it's a real one step forward, two steps back kind of situation, but after a fiery escape, of course, all roads lead...
All roads lead to Hogsmeade.
Shut up! Shut up!
No, they don't. They lead back to Hogwarts. So after a one-movie absence, we get to return to Hogwarts. Although it's a very different Hogwarts than the one that we remember. There's this whole new staircase that we've never even seen before. There's a lot of uplifting moments, like Harry going through the door to find the remainder of Dumbledore's army, and Ginny, who he very much missed in his time away from her, you can just tell. They even used John Williams' soundtrack from the first few movies as a means to bring the story full circle, and it definitely tears at the heartstrings a bit, and just reminds you of how far this story has come. This continues with the badass nature of the film, with Harry calling out Snape, McGonagall fighting Snape, and the ever-amazing line,
I've always wanted to use that spell.
Another thing I've got to point out is how Harry is using Malfoy's wand in this entire movie, which I absolutely love. From schoolyard bully to direct enemy to on the same side in a deleted scene, I love when stuff like this happens in fantasy stories. I can't really explain why other than the fact that I love the irony of it all. Everything about the Battle of Hogwarts is, again, super cool and satisfying to see unfold. There's all these little moments of victory spread between huge moments of defeat. The whole structure of this battle is very different from how it was in the books, but again, hot take here, but I actually think it's done a bit better. This battle is very reminiscent of one of the greatest battles of all time, and that's the Battle of Helm's Deep. Both good sides are up against a seemingly indestructible or unbeatable enemy, holding them off for as long as they can from the comfort of their castle. Hogwarts has the Order of the Phoenix, a bunch of kids, and maybe a couple hundred statues, whereas Voldemort has thousands of dark wizards, giants, spiders, dementors. The enemy takes the upper hand pretty quickly, though they have a lot of moments where the good guys make some leeway and have little victories. Ron apparently speaks Parseltongue from Harry's sleep talking. Yeah, sure, okay. But they destroy the cup. That's more progress than they made in the entirety of the last film. But Harry is seemingly getting injured as they continue on. Weird, I don't know. And the death toll just continues to rise. That's another thing I find myself very surprised at, and that's just how deadly this battle is. I mean, it's realistic for sure. A lot of people would die in a battle of this scale. But JK really didn't pull her punches here when she decided who to kill off. There are a lot of named characters who die in very tragic ways. With that being said, a lot of this is done off screen or just not as impactful as it was in the book. Fred's death in the book is maybe the most tragic death of the entire series, and that's saying something. He dies mid-telling a joke, and his face is stuck in that same smile when he dies. It's like he's the Joker or something. It's terrifying, tragic, sudden, and really makes you feel the impact of this battle. In the movie, he dies as part of a montage sequence. This aspect of the film always feels like it was trying to pull its punches quite a bit to maintain that PG-13 rating, and while I understand that, now that I'm an adult, I would love to see some type of R-rated Wizarding World story. This is the only film in the series where dark magic and giant battles are the focus, and I think it's all done very well. They went all out in showing us wizard fights that aren't just people pointing their wands at each other, other than the Dumbledore versus Voldemort fight, and this feels more realistic because a lot of these fights would probably just be one or two spells being cast at the other, and also the whole Priori Incantatem thing is something that happens between Harry and Voldemort. It's supposed to be very rare, not an everyday thing like a lot of this series does. One sequence this movie does particularly well in this regard is the whole courtyard battle, specifically with how it's essentially a callback to the entire series. The first thing they run into is a troll, like the first movie. Then they run into a bunch of spiders, like the second movie, then a werewolf and a bunch of dementors, the third movie. They're saved by the Order of the Phoenix, fifth movie, and where are they going? That's right, to go and find Snape, aka the Half-Blood Prince. Now this is just a theory of what this scene was accomplishing, and it would have been cool to see either Fleur, Victor Crumb, or Amos Diggory in this fight to give it something related to the Goblet of Fire, but if this was intended, then it's very clever. But perhaps the biggest death of this movie, and of this series, is Severus Snape, because directly afterwards we get to see his backstory, how he was in love with Lily Potter, how he was secretly helping Harry this entire time, how Dumbledore didn't really give a shit about Harry, how he told Snape that he was the one who has to kill him, and it does change a lot about the character of Severus Snape. But again, this scene is kinda butchered in the movie. A lot of it doesn't make much sense with the timeline, and it's confusing about when things are taking place. Again, something that the book does that much better. But it gets the point across that Snape was an asshole, sure, but not actually evil. The third act of this film is, in my opinion, I think what makes this entire series so rewatchable. You know that going into a rewatch that the finale is going to be satisfying to watch and make the entire series journey worth it once again. Narcissa lying to Voldemort about Harry being dead because he went back and saved Malfoy, Neville getting his heroic moment to stand up to Voldemort and kill Nagini. Contrary to what a lot of people say, I actually don't mind that Harry is not fighting Voldemort in front of everyone at the Great Hall. I feel like if there's a room full of people watching this, then any one of them should have just gone up and killed Voldemort themselves after the snake is killed. And I never noticed this before, but there are just a few random people watching this fight go down anyways. I don't like how Voldemort gets Thanos snapped to death. The whole point of him dying a regular person's death in the book is to show that he's just human, the same as everybody else, despite his best efforts to become something else. Him disappearing into a pile of ashes makes him seem like he was some larger-than-life threat, kind of vindicating him in his final moments. Another controversial take here, but I actually kinda like a majority of this movie better than how it plays out in the books. In the book, I don't know what it was, but Joanne absolutely sprinted to the finish line. Voldemort dies, and I kid you not, in the copy of the book I'm holding in my hands right now, 11 pages later, the book is over. And that's including the epilogue. The epilogue, both in the book and the movie, are a nice nod to the future to see how things get played out, but the immediate aftermath of this battle is glazed over very quickly. I know Return of the King gets its fair share of hatred for how many endings it has, but I would have liked to see something similar to that here. The funeral for all these people, how it affected their families, what happened to everybody else afterwards, the rebuilding of Hogwarts, Hermione going back to Hogwarts and getting her parents back, Snape being vindicated by Harry, Harry becoming an Auror, Ron doing that too, or running the joke shop with George. With how long this series is, with how many characters there are, I feel like both J.K. Rowling and the movie really dropped the ball with the actual ending. And sure, it leaves it up to your imagination, but it doesn't really with how many times Joanne has gone back and told us what's new. She should have just done that a long time ago, but she feels the need to keep coming back and adding stuff to this story just to stay relevant. I mean, it's not like her name is in headlines for anything else, right? Despite my grievances, this is a very satisfying movie to watch. It's a satisfying and worthy conclusion to a decade of films, so I'm giving Deathly Hallows Part 2 a 9 out of 10. So overall, the Harry Potter films were, and remain to this day, a massive success. Was it absolutely perfect? No, it wasn't. I think regardless of what she says, JK did not have this entire series planned out, and that's abundantly clear with the story of the Half-Blood Prince. While sure, there were things like Tom Riddle's diary that were retconned into being Horcruxes, this whole idea and how Voldemort is alive again was clearly thought of afterwards, and that's not a bad thing. It's just very clear that the later half of the series felt very different from the first half because it had to introduce and reintroduce these concepts at the expense of some of the storytelling. And this is very telling with these theatrical adaptations. Not all of the concepts and plans from the earlier stories were fleshed out in the 2-hour runtimes, so different aspects of the stories had to retroactively be added in, even if there was no proper setup for them beforehand, which is more of an issue with the production side of things, and something that I'm sure will be focused on this upcoming adaptation. Do I see why and how this new show is being made in order to deliver the full and truthful Harry Potter experience? Yeah, but I also don't think that's the purpose of this new show at all. The Harry Potter IP sells, and it sells a lot, regardless of which medium it is, and in an age where legacy sequels are being pumped out at an extreme rate, they wanted to do that with Harry Potter, and they did with Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. But for a variety of reasons, this can't be made into a movie. Whether that be because the principal actors aren't willing to return, or because some of the principal actors have passed away and they would need to be recast anyways. I think the people at Warner Brothers and HBO figured, well, if we can't make this sequel, let's just nosedive into doing the entire series again. We can include stuff from the books with the additional time, we can add in other stuff that wasn't in the books that we want to tell, and we can make this for a whole new generation and get a whole lot of money in the process. Personally, I am excited to see how this new show turns out. I'll be watching it week to week, trying very hard not to compare and contrast, but even if this new show somehow knocks it out of the park, Harry Potter, to me, will forever be these movies, these books, these toys, these games, and a huge part of my childhood. And that's perfectly okay with me. Thanks for watching this far. If you couldn't tell, I am a little bit sick, so if I mispronounce something or if I just kind of don't sound like myself, that's the reason why. That's the reason why I haven't posted a video in a little while. I was trying to get over this, but I'm starting to come back on the other side. So what are your thoughts on the Harry Potter movies? What do you agree and disagree with me on? Are you excited for this new TV show? Are you even willing to give it a chance? Let me know in the comments below. Special thanks to all my channel members. You guys are the best, and I'll see you all in the next one.